My hair is still drying, so it's probably gonna like poof up over the course of this video, but it's fine. Hey everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. So today I am doing a very exciting video, one you've probably been waiting for, and that is my top 10 favorite books of the year. So these are the top 10 books that I've read over the course of 2019 and that I really enjoyed and that I want you to know that I really enjoyed. So obviously these are going to be like very subjective opinions, especially for this video. I feel like there were certain books that a lot of people didn't like that I really enjoyed, and there were other books that I didn't really like that other people enjoyed, so I did not include them, that kind of thing. Unlike last year, I did not number this list. As I have said multiple times before, I didn't have the best reading year this year, but all of these books were still really great. I just feel like I cannot really rank them because I don't feel like I particularly loved any of them more than the other. I feel like they were all just really, really great. But yes, so we're just gonna get right into the 10 books / series that I really enjoyed this year. All right, the first book that I want to talk about / series that I want to talk about is the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. So this is a YA mystery series that I recently read and absolutely fell in love with. I read these earlier this year for my Epic Book Recs series and I was just totally blown away. I was not expecting to like them as much as I did. I went into them kind of not really knowing a lot and being absolutely blown away. So far there's Truly Devious and The Vanishing Stare. The third book is coming out in January. It's called The Hand on the Wall. So I've never actually read any Maureen Johnson. Like I've read some of her short stories with Cassandra Clare, but I've never actually read her own like standalone books. So I wasn't sure if I was gonna like this, but I really did. I think I really liked the main character, Stevie Bell. I think she was a very unique heroine. She was very curious, but also a bit shy, and she was also very forceful as well, which I loved. And I also just really liked the different characters that kind of crop up throughout the series because it is a mystery series. So there's like little minor characters that you're just always kind of keeping an eye on because you're like, are you the killer? But basically the series takes place at Ellingham Academy, which was like this fancy kind of private academy that was created by this man named Albert Ellingham in like the 30s. And he created this academy for his daughter and for any kids who had like particular interests or special skills. But a few years after the academy opened, Albert Ellingham's wife and daughter were mysteriously kidnapped, and there's a ransom note sent to him by someone called Truly Devious. But even after kind of paying the ransom, he never got his wife and daughter back, and so it's kind of always been this unsolved mystery. And so many years later, in the current day, a young 16-year-old girl named Stevie Bell ends up attending Ellingham Academy. She is a true crime aficionado, and she is kind of obsessed with the mystery of Ellingham Academy and what happened and the whole Truly Devious case. And so she's determined to crack it and figure out what happened. But while she is at school, some mysterious things start happening and a murder occurs, and so she ends up getting involved in that mystery as well. And so each of the books has its self-contained mystery, but it also has like the overarching mystery of Ellingham Academy, and I absolutely loved it all around, and I think it's a great mystery series if you're looking for one. I don't usually read like a lot of mystery or like thrillers, so yeah, really enjoyed this, and I definitely recommend. All right, on a similar vein, the next book that I want to talk about is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. So this came out quite a few years ago, but I read it only this year and I really enjoyed it. It was kind of a book that I knew I was probably going to enjoy, so I kept putting it off, and then when I finally did pick it up, I absolutely loved it. It like consumed me while I was reading it. It is definitely built like a mystery thriller, so it's one of those books that kind of like consumes you and you like want to just keep reading and you want to find out what happens. So basically it follows these 6 young Shakespearean actors who go to like this private fancy arts academy university thing, and it is told from the perspective of this one guy in the group who you find out is getting released from jail after 10 years and you don't know why or what he did to get there. And so he's kind of going back 10 years ago, back to when they all went to school together, and he's telling the story. The thing I absolutely loved about this book was definitely the characters, but also the writing. It was very gripping and very descriptive language, and it just hooked me in, and all of the characters were just so vivid and had their very distinct personalities, but it was also the way that they interacted with each other. I think the thing that the author did the best with was the like tension between the characters, whether it was sexual tension or like just, you know, regular tension. Like it was just so intense, and so every page it was like, oh my god, there's so much subtext to every scene, and I am just like cracking under the pressure. But yeah, it was just absolutely wonderful. I also just really like Shakespeare, and there's a lot of Shakespeare references, a lot of like Shakespeare plays that they do and Shakespeare lines that are in this book, and so it was just really interesting in that way as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. Really great kind of standalone mystery. It is an adult one, so if you're looking for more adult to read, it's a great one. The next book that I want to talk about is kind of an unexpected one. I didn't actually think I would like this as much as I did. I read one of the author's like previous books, which I really did enjoy, but I didn't enjoy it enough to like put on like my favorite books of the year list. But I really enjoyed this one for no particular reason that I can like identify. But that book is Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. So I have read Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi, and while like I liked it, I didn't like love it, but this one I think I really did enjoy. I think I read it right when I was like feeling a lot of the things that the main character was. Basically it follows her main character Pablo Rind, who is kind of failing at a lot of things in life. He has recently dropped out of NYU. He doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. He is working night shifts at a bodega in New York City, and it's like the middle of winter, and he has like this kind of successful Instagram account of like different food combinations and things and like snacks, but he doesn't really know what he wants to do with that, and he's kind of stuck on an idea of success that he wants to achieve, but he doesn't know how to get there, and he doesn't really want to put in the hard work for that, and so he's kind of going broke, and he's dealing with the pressures from both of his parents. He is biracial. His mother is Korean and his father is from Bali, I believe, so there's also like that element of the book, but there's also like a strong element of New York City in this book as well. And so when Pablo's bodega is visited at 5 a.m. by this like big celebrity named Leanna Smart. She has like this huge Instagram. She's a singer. She's just a giant celebrity. When she visits, they both kind of end up in this weird whirlwindy romance that seems like it's going to be like a really rom-com-y kind of book, but it really doesn't end up being that way. It was a lot drier, a lot more cynical, a lot more real in a lot of ways. It was very honest as well. I think I liked this because it was on the older side of the YA spectrum, and you know, Pablo's of like college age and so is Leanna, and they're kind of dealing with different problems. But I also just really liked the kind of bittersweetness of this book, I would say. There's not a lot of like happy endings or like typical big movie moments. It's just like very kind of regular stuff that becomes kind of weirdly extraordinary, but also comes back down to earth, if that makes any kind of sense. I'm not really making any sense. I just really liked how honest this book was, I think. And Mary H.K. Choi's writing, it is very honest, it's very to the point, and it's also like full of pulp culture references and with times, and also very specific to New York. You know, she makes a lot of references to places and things in New York, so that was really nice. I really felt like I was like in New York when I was reading this. So yeah, I kind of devoured this in a day or two, and I just really enjoyed it. So it's like a weird little book that kind of had me still thinking like way later on. So yeah, absolutely love those. All right, the next book that I want to talk about is one that I don't have with me physically because I let a friend borrow it, but that is the third book in the Arc of Sides series, and that is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. So this is the cover if you don't know it or you haven't seen it before, but basically I had to include this because this is the newest book in the Arc of Sides series, and if you watched my top 10 books of last year video, I absolutely loved Scythe and Thunderhead, the first two books in the series. They are a sci-fi series set far in the future where humanity has kind of conquered death and disease, and so there are these things called Scythes who are tasked with gleaning people and kind of maintaining population growth. And there's also like this crazy AI character that kind of runs all of the world and humanity and all of that, called the Thunderhead. So this is the third book, and after the ending of Thunderhead, like you are just left with so many questions and you don't know where the series is gonna go. So I was just like on the edge of my seat waiting for this to come out, and I was just so excited when it did. And when I got to it, I think it did a really good job of kind of wrapping up the whole series and addressing so many interesting questions about the world and the future. And I just thought it was like one of those sci-fi novels that really leaves you thinking a lot about what the future could be like. And I just absolutely love the characters in this series as well. It is one of those series that is less focused on a single character or like a couple characters and more focused on like the broader picture, and the picture gets even broader in this book. So in some ways you didn't get that personal journey, but you did get to see like this big masterpiece of a story come together, and I just absolutely loved it. So yeah, there's not much I can say about this without spoiling anything, so I'm not going to say much more, but all you really need to know is that I absolutely loved it. And I definitely recommend the series as a whole because I think it was just absolutely amazing, and it's definitely like reached like my Hall of Fame favorite book series ever. All right, the next book that I wanted to talk about is another book that I lent to one of my friends, so I don't have it with me, but it was one of my all-time favorite books of this year, and I just cannot talk about it enough. And I know a lot of other people also really enjoyed it and really loved it, but I have heard more mixed reviews recently, which is like kind of worrisome because I think it was amazing. And a lot of that has to do with the personal kind of connections that I had with the book. But that book is Frankly in Love by David Yoon. So this is David Yoon's debut novel. He is the husband of Nicola Yoon, who's the author of The Sun Is Also a Star, if you didn't know that connection. I was just so excited about this one. I found out about it because it involved like a fake dating thing. It involved a main character who is Korean and he is the son of immigrants. So there's that kind of element. But honestly, I went into this book thinking it was going to be a really like kind of cute, funny, rom-com-y book about this boy who fake dates this Korean girl that he knows to get away with actually dating this white girl that he knows his parents would never approve of. But the book ended up being so much more than that, and that was what just kind of blew me away. It was a lot more about family and about Frank's identity issues. He is Korean, but he is, you know, American born, American raised, and he goes through this kind of like identity struggle of what it means to be Korean, but also Korean American and also more American, and growing up with parents who are immigrants and so who have not completely kind of given themselves over to being American. And it was just really interesting discussion of, you know, identity and all of that. And the whole fake dating thing is an element of that. And there's a sweet romance in this as well, and kind of a really big element of friendship. There's also some really nice like side characters and like minor characters in the book that I absolutely loved as well. But this book also talks a lot about like race as well, and racism amongst the communities of color as well. And so I thought that that was really great. I just thought it was like really well done in terms of representation and coming from like own voices, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I remember like finishing it and just like crying a lot because there is also a huge element with Frank's parents as well, and I just connected to that a lot. So yeah, I know some people just couldn't get into this book, which I understand to a certain extent, but I'm also like, it was awesome and amazing, and I just personally really loved it. So yeah, it is one of those books that has become one of my all-time favorite books. Like, this has become a year where a lot of contemporaries have become my favorite, which is really weird, but this is definitely one of those, and it was definitely a contemporary where I was like, oh my god, I see myself so much in this, and so that's one of the reasons why I appreciated it so much. Speaking of books that I liked that no one else seemed to like, the next book that I absolutely loved and which became one of my absolute favorites this year is Gilded Wolves by Roxana. So this is a book that I know a lot of people did not like, and for reasons I understand and for reasons I don't understand as well. But I will say that it did take me a while to like get into this book and kind of continue reading it. But although I read it quite slowly, I still feel like every time I picked it up, I did value everything that I was reading, and I did get a lot out of it. And by the end of it, I really wanted to know what happened, but I also just really cared about all the characters. I think that's one of the things about this book, is that I really cared for each and every one of the characters. It follows, I think, 5 or 6 different perspectives, and it takes place in 1889 in Paris, and it follows like this ragtag kind of crew of people of different races and cultures and all that kind of coming together to pull off this magical heist. A lot of people were comparing it to Six of Crows because of the whole heist element and big cast of characters, but it was a lot different in many ways, and I feel like that comparison brought a lot of hate onto this book that was undeserved. But the reason I love this book is because of the really amazing discussions of race and colonialism, and it talks about and deals with the very real reality that many marginalized communities went through in history. And I felt like that was such a huge part. Many of the main characters in this book are of mixed race. They are dealing with different kind of things. You know, there's a discussion of, you know, passing for other races, or, you know, being white passing. One of the main characters, Lila, you know, she's often mistaken as the help because she is South Asian. There's a character in here who is Jewish, who is thrown out of her school because she's Jewish. And it's about these characters who have been wronged by the world, by colonialism, and are trying to take back what they deserve and reclaim artifacts or objects. You know, this whole book is surrounding a heist over an object. So it really does kind of work as like a metaphor for anti-colonialism. You know, one of the things that Roxana said in an interview was that all that is gold does not glitter. All of these beautiful things that were kind of taken away to museums and discovered through colonialism, you know, do not belong where they are now. And just because they seem beautiful does not mean that there's not a history of harm and hurt that has brought them to where they are. These characters are dealing with artifacts in these beautiful museums in Paris that were kind of stolen away from their original homes. And this book deals with a kind of magic that is centered in objects. And so it was a very interesting kind of magic system. And I feel like for some people, this series came off very complicated and confusing, but I do feel like once you get past that, it just had so much to it, and thematically was just so important. And I just loved it so much, and I connected to so many of these characters. Like, there were so many moments where I was like nodding along to what they were saying, and I'm like, oh my god, yes, oh my god, yes. So this book has like a very special place in my heart and will continue to be one of my favorites ever, and I just can't wait to see where it goes in the future books. But yes, overall I just really love this, and I just wish more people would give it a chance. So yeah. Alright, the next book that I want to talk about is one of my all-time favorites, and I did not expect this, but I like had heard someone else talk about this. It was Sajid from Books Are My Social Life. He talked about this, and then I decided to pick it up, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I read this earlier in this year, I think in March, and that book is The Love and Lies of Roxana Ali by Sabina Khan. So I think this author is actually Canadian, which was totally awesome. I didn't know when I was reading it, but it follows our main character, Roxana Ali, whose parents are from Bangladesh, and she is Muslim, and she comes from this very conservative family, but she is gay. She's a lesbian, and if her parents ever found out, it would not be good, which is what kind of happens. So when her mother, you know, walks in on her kissing her girlfriend, she ends up getting kind of whisked away to Bangladesh, and she ends up getting set up in this kind of arranged marriage in the hopes of just kind of praying the gay away. And this is a book that really deals with queerness in communities of color, and just, you know, the implications of that and why it's really hard for a lot of people to come out. But it also deals with the nuances of these communities and the allies that she ends up finding in her community. And although this can be a very kind of harrowing read at times, it can get very homophobic, very intense as well, it was overall a very heartwarming read in the end, and I just felt like it was so important. And it was one of the first times that I've read a book that showed that intersection of queerness and, you know, being a person of color together in a very personal kind of context, from an Asian community, from a Muslim community. I just thought it was just so great, and I just loved seeing that representation, and I devoured this in a single day, and it was just so amazing. So yeah, highly recommend. One of my all-time favorite contemporaries now. I will like recommend this to the day I die, because I just thought it was so amazing, and I'm just so glad it is out in the world for young queer teens of color who can pick this up and like see themselves. Like, I'm just so excited for that. So yes, one of my faves for this year, but also one of my all-time faves in the world. Alright, the next book that I want to share with you today, the second last one that I have, is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. So this is a book that I'm like totally late to the game with. A lot of people read this like last year or the year before, and it was really big, and I like never picked it up because it was a contemporary and I wasn't really feeling it. But I picked this up this year for my Epic Book Rec series, for a video on like books with mental health and mental illnesses kind of represented. And so I picked this up knowing it had representation for anxiety, and I was just absolutely blown away. It follows her main character Eliza, who is this webtoon comic creator. So she is known by like millions of people for her very famous series called, I think, The Monster Sea, but no one actually knows like who she is. She has like a pen name, and no one's seen pictures of her, so no one knows her. So she kind of hides behind this persona of this author, and she kind of hides herself from her family as well, who's this very kind of social butterfly family. They're all on the sports teams and think whatever she's doing is kind of like a hobby. And so Eliza's kind of dealing with all of this, and then she ends up meeting this boy at school who is actually a fan fiction writer for Monstrous Sea. He really loves it, and so the two of them end up striking up this like unlikely friendship. He is also very shy and has his own struggles with his mental health as well, and so the two of them kind of break each other out of their shells, and Eliza starts to make friends and all of that. But there's this pressing issue of the fact that the boy, Wallace, doesn't know that she is the creator of Monstrous Sea, and so she doesn't really want him to find out, but she also wants to be honest. And it was just a really great book. Eliza was a very relatable character. It gets very intense towards the end. This book goes to very dark places as well towards the end, but I thought it was just so well done and so well written. And I also just thought the whole element of her being this like creator of this like giant web comic was just so interesting. But overall, I just thought it was a really enjoyable read as well, so definitely recommend this one if you wanted like a contemporary that was fun at times but also pretty intense. I would definitely recommend this one. Hey everyone, so it's Jananie from a few weeks later, after I edited this video and realized that I forgot to mention one of the top 10 books for this year. So here we are. And so that book slash series is the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. I could not go without mentioning the series because it kind of took over my life this year. I kind of devoured The Cruel Prince after I got about the 20% way in. I read it on ebook and just absolutely fell in love with it, and I really just liked Jude as a character. She was just so cutthroat, and I loved Carden as well. He was just a lot more layered than I initially thought he was gonna be, and that just kind of continued in each of the later books. So the Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing, which came out at the end of the year. But yes, I absolutely enjoyed all three. I think my favorite was The Wicked King. But for those of you who don't know, this follows our main character Jude, who has a twin sister and an older sister, and they're humans who had human parents, but their mother was originally married to a fairy, and so when that fairy comes to the human world and murders their parents, he ends up taking the three girls back to fairy with him and raising them there. And so Jude has kind of grown up around these cutthroat fairies who, you know, live long lives and, you know, don't care about the emotions of humans and have really thick skins, that kind of thing. And so she ends up learning to be really cruel and ruthless, and she's kind of grown up with these like terrible fairy bullies as well because they can compel her to do things. But she ends up kind of getting involved in the politics of fairy and with one of the princes in fairy, whose name is Carden. And there's some really crazy hijinks in this series as well, and I just really enjoyed it. I did feel it was a bit hard to get into the first book, but as soon as I got about 20% in, I really started to enjoy it, and I do think the rest of the series was also really great. So if you do like fantasy and if you like fairies, then this is a really great one. I also just really like the series because each book is quite short. They're not very long. They're pretty quick reads for fantasy, so yeah, definitely enjoy these. And now back to delusional Jananie, who thought she actually filmed this properly. Okay, and the last book that I wanted to talk about today, one of my favorite books of this year. Obviously, as I said, this whole list is not numbered at all. I just like them all and I wanted to talk about them all. But the last book that I have to mention is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is unsurprising because Leigh Bardugo, I absolutely love most of the things that she writes. But as you can tell, King of Scars is not on this list because I didn't enjoy it as much. But this book, I absolutely loved, and it did take me a while to get into it, as many of you might know if you've been following my channel. But once I got into it, I really did enjoy it and love it. I thought it was really well written. I thought that the whole overall story was just really interesting and unique as well. It is an adult novel. It follows our main character, Alex Stern, and she's basically given a second chance after she is found in a very gruesome crime scene, and she's given the opportunity to go to Yale, and she becomes part of House Leith, which is the ninth house of the kind of secret societies of Yale, and it is the house that kind of manages and watches over the other secret societies and makes sure that they don't go overboard with their magic and rituals and all that kind of stuff. And so the book alternates between different timelines before things go wrong and after they go wrong, and there is another character of a mentor named Darlington that Alex is dealing with, but there are a lot of ghosts and interesting magic as well in this book. It is a very dark book, a very sad book at times, very intense, very kind of gross as well. And it also has like a bit of a murder mystery in it as well. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I think by the end, I just was so invested in the story. I really wanted Alex to be okay, but I also just wanted to know what happened, like, you know, who did it basically. I also just thought it had some really interesting themes. It is a book that kind of makes you angry towards the end, and it's not a happy book either. It's a very intense kind of adult book, and I'm very interested to see where it goes in the next book. But this has been a pretty popular book this year, and I do think for good reason. Leigh Bardugo is an amazing writer, and I am looking forward to anything that she writes in the future. So, but those are all of the books that I want to talk about today, my top 10 books of 2019. This was a pretty rough reading year for me, but overall I think all the books that I mentioned today were just really amazing and awesome, and I just really did love them. So I hope you found a book that you are hoping to pick up, or I have somehow convinced you to pick up one of these if you weren't thinking of doing it before. I am super excited for all the reading that I'm going to do in 2020, but I think it was a pretty good reading year overall. I read like 80 books, and these were 10 awesome ones that I got out of it. But let me know down below what your top 10 books of 2019 were. I would love to hear all of your thoughts and kind of what books you guys were loving this year. I can definitely think of like a bunch that I know a lot of people loved, but I would love to hear your personal top 10 faves of 2019. But until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and please remember that the story ain't over. Bye!